Uncle Chael, how you doing? Me and baby Ava here with the question. Recently, a picture surfaced of Kamaru Usman and Douglas Lima in some form of standoff, I guess in Houston. And I want to know your thoughts on that. Who would you give the edge? And what do you think about that particular cross promotion bout? Love your stuff. Thanks.
It's funny you should bring that up. Joe Rogan just had Usman on his show, and I don't know if this came up when Usman was on the show or if Joe had done another podcast like 3 days before he had Usman, and now I'm blending them together. I really don't know, but Rogan weighed in on this. And I always love to get Rogan's opinion because Rogan is very insightful, and Rogan does not forget very much. And when Rogan sees something, he's got like a photogenic memory. So when Rogan is to break down the history of, in this case, Lima, and the history, in this case, of Kamaru, you can get a very good expert's opinion, and I listen to that. I've seen all of Kamaru's fights, okay? I saw Kamaru wrestle as an amateur. I've seen all of Lima's fights, all the way to recently when he not only won the Grand Prix, but he upset Rory McDonald, got back his world championship. Lima has had trouble one time in his career, and that was in a fight with a gentleman named Ben Askren. And at that point in Lima's career, he simply was not equipped with wrestling defense to deal with a guy who had just come out of the Olympic Games in wrestling. And Ben Askren, he just simply was not. That isn't only my assessment. I spoke to Lima about that fight, and Lima said, I wasn't ready at that time for wrestling. Oh, and by the way, of all the wrestling I've ever done, I've never felt anybody like Ben Askren. He was very complimentary. The reason I bring up the wrestling aspect is that is one place that you would have to look if you studied Lima's career and you remember the Askren fight, and you studied Usman's career and you remember the night he won the championship with T. Wood. You would have to ask yourself, can Lima deal with that? Now, Lima has shown such progression over his career. Lima's been stopping takedowns of everybody, including Rory McDonald. And I realize Rory McDonald wasn't an Olympian, but Rory McDonald is one amazing, not just good, he is an amazing MMA wrestler. Okay. So I do believe Lima when he gives a self-assessment to say, I'm a lot better at that, I can deal with that now. I happen to believe him. Can he deal with that for 25 minutes with Usman? No, of course not. Usman's going to drag his ass down at some point. Sure he is. But now let's look at the other side of the coin. Lima is so nasty in the stand-up. I mean, Lima fought Paul Daly by example. This was a fight that should be a very big fight, but at a time in their careers when it happened, it kind of went under the radar, so I'm going to remind you of it because I feel as though people have forgotten. Lima not only finished Paul Daly in the stand-up, he knocked Paul Daly down 3 times. Tell me in Paul Daly's career, 3 times he's been knocked down. Take that fight out of it where I just gave you the answer. Tell me 3 times in 30 different men who have tried, tell me 3 times Paul Daly's been taken off his feet with a punch or a kick or a knee or an elbow. You can't do it. Lima did it 3 times and one night and ultimately kept him down. Lima can fight on his feet, period. Lima gets billed as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu expert, as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He is both of those things. But Lima has spent the last significant period of his life in training, in stopping takedowns, in getting up off the bottom, and predominantly with his kickboxing, all the way to training a meaningful amount of his camps in Thailand. I mean, he is something nasty on his feet, and he's throwing kicks that other guys aren't throwing. He's doing what's known as a calf kick. Now, the calf kick was introduced to MMA by Benson Henderson, but Benson Henderson doesn't get the credit for it. Lima does. I'm not totally sure how that works. That's actually a Benson Henderson move, and Benson Henderson brought that to this sport, but Lima gets the credit for it because it's what Lima goes to every time. Lima wore Rory McDonald down with it. Rory McDonald had to fight a round and a half on one leg because he got kicked in the calf. We've seen guys kicked in the thigh. Started with Marco Huas, followed up by Chuck Liddell. We've seen guys, Jose Aldo, Anderson Silva, that have worn guys down at the thigh so bad that they can no longer stand. At the calf, we've seen it one time. It was Lima versus McDonald. Now, Lima went out and did this same trick to MVP. And one thing going into the fight, when Lima was going to fight MVP, was, hey, Lima, don't stand with MVP, which is damn good advice, which is anybody that has the sense that God gave geese is going to give to Lima. Except Lima. Lima didn't agree with that. He said, no, the guy's got some good tricks, but I got the skills. The guy's a little bit flashy, but I got the basics. I'm going to go ahead and stand with him. He did stand with him. And he knocked him down. And then he knocked him out. My point being, if you want to argue Kamaru, who is the best fighter in the world, and you want to argue Lima, who is the best fighter in the world, and you're talking about a fantasy match, which we're not going to be able to see because ultimately what you're talking about is a co-promote, and the sport is just simply not there and really not even headed in that direction yet. You could have a very fascinating debate. And if you wanted to give, just on the numbers and just off resumes and paper, the wrestling to Usman, not a lot of people are going to argue with you. If you wanted to give the stand-up to Usman, you're going to get met with some argument. You're going to get met with some resistance. I don't know the answer myself. I have an opinion, but I don't know. I don't know. That's why those boys got to go fight. I mean, that's the whole reason that we have these fights. If we knew who was going to win, first off, we'd have no interest. But second off, we could just mail the belt out. We could just figure out who's champion via FedEx, right? We just ship the belt all over town when we got a new guy. They got to go fight. And I do think, particularly, one thing that Douglas Lima has done lately is he has, and he told me this himself, I want to try to get the words right. He has just taken fatigue out of the equation. And it's not because he doesn't still get tired or he's doing some new conditioning thing. He said he has made a mental choice, decision, and commitment to himself that he no longer cares about being tired. I know what that means. I had a period, if I can personalize this, of my career where I did that. But it was a very small period because that is a very hard thing to do. It is a very difficult thing to not manage energy. Some would even call it an irresponsible thing. But if you're one of these guys who understands I'm going to get tired, but so's my opponent, nothing's going to get better until this night's over, so to hell with it, we'll worry about it later. If you're one of those guys that can not only say that, but go out and execute upon it, you're going to be champion. Proof of the fact, Douglas Lima happens to be champion.